Hello, and welcome back to Today English Podcast. My name is Laura, and I'm here to guide you on your journey to clear, confident, and natural English. If you're new here, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a lesson. Your support truly helps this channel grow. All right, take a deep breath, relax, and let's begin today's session. When you think about motivation, it often feels like a small light inside you. A light that sometimes shines bright and sometimes becomes weak. And in this story, we begin with that small light, a light that belongs to a person named Daniel. A person who wakes up one normal morning with a heavy feeling in his chest, but he cannot explain why, because everything around him looks normal. The sky outside the window is soft and blue. The birds are singing. The morning air is fresh, and yet he feels slow inside, as if his energy is hiding somewhere far away, and as he sits on the edge of his bed, he whispers to himself in a very soft voice, "I want to feel motivated again," but the words sound weak, almost like they are floating away from him. And he wonders when he last felt truly excited about his day, when he last woke up with a clear mind and a strong heart, and as he tries to remember, he feels a little lost, so he takes a deep breath, stands up slowly, and tells himself that today he will try something new. Today he will try to understand motivation in a different way, not as a big, loud force, but as a small friend he wants to reconnect with, and while he makes this decision, he does not know that this simple choice will guide him on a long, gentle journey. A journey that teaches him how motivation really works, how it grows, how it disappears, and how, with practice, it can return stronger than before. And this is where our story truly begins, with Daniel walking toward the kitchen to make his morning tea, feeling the warm light of the sun on his face, and thinking about all the mornings when he felt full of energy. Mornings when he had clear plans, strong ideas, and a big smile because he believed something good was waiting for him. And as he stands in the kitchen now, he feels different, almost empty. So he asks himself a simple question: why did I lose my motivation? And while the kettle heats the water and the quiet sound fills the room, he lets his mind wander through old memories, through busy days, stressful moments, quiet fears, and small disappointments, and he realizes that motivation did not disappear suddenly. It faded slowly, step by step, as he got tired, as he forgot to rest, as he stopped doing small things that once made him feel happy. And as this thought grows, he remembers a moment from many months ago, a moment when he sat at a cafe near his home, looking at people walking on the street, all of them moving with purpose, with energy, with something inside them pushing them forward, and he felt inspired just watching them. But now he feels far from that moment, almost like it was a different life. So he sits down at his kitchen table with his warm cup of tea between his hands and tells himself that maybe the first step to finding motivation again is not to push himself, but to understand himself, to look inside gently instead of forcing anything. And this idea feels soft and kind, so he takes another sip of tea and closes his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to breathe slowly. And this slow breathing becomes the beginning of a tiny transformation, because for the first time in a long time, he is not judging himself. He is not telling himself that he is lazy or weak. He is simply noticing how he feels, and this quiet awareness creates a small space inside him, a space where new energy can enter. And as he opens his eyes again, he notices something interesting, something simple but powerful. The morning light looks brighter than a moment ago, and he smiles at this, wondering if the world changed or if he changed inside just a little bit. And while he sits there, feeling this soft but new kind of calm, he decides to take a small walk, not a long walk, not an exercise routine, just a slow, gentle walk around his neighborhood because he remembers that movement often wakes up his mind. So he puts on his shoes, steps outside, and feels the cool morning air on his face, and as he starts walking, he lets his steps be slow, natural, without pressure, and he begins to notice things he normally ignores: the sound of leaves moving in the wind, the smell of bread from the bakery nearby, the soft laughter of two children walking to school, and with each detail, he feels something changing, something opening in him. And he starts to understand that motivation is not a big explosion of energy, it is a small connection to life, a connection to the world around him, and as this idea forms inside his mind, he feels his feet moving more easily, his shoulders relaxing, and he remembers a friend telling him once, "Motivation grows when you move," and now this simple sentence feels true, because here he is, walking slowly, just breathing, just seeing small things, and yet something inside him feels warmer, more alive, and with this tiny spark warming his chest, his thoughts become clearer, and he wonders if maybe motivation has been waiting for him, waiting quietly, waiting for him to return to himself, and as he continues to walk, he begins thinking about the many days in the past when he forced himself to do things, when he tried to push himself too hard, hoping the pressure would create motivation, but instead it made him feel exhausted. And now he begins to realize that motivation does not grow from pressure, it grows from presence, from noticing, from breathing, from small actions that remind you that you are alive. And as he walks past a small park, he sees an old man sitting on a bench feeding birds, and the old man looks peaceful, as if he has no hurry, no stress, no big goals to reach at that moment. And Daniel wonders how long it has been since he allowed himself to be that calm, to just sit and enjoy something simple. And as he watches the man, he feels something inside him soften, as if he is learning a new lesson without words, a lesson about slowing down, a lesson about being okay with small moments. And when the old man looks up and smiles at him, Daniel smiles back, and this exchange feels strangely important, almost like a beautiful reminder that connection, even simple connection, is part of motivation, because humans feel more alive when they feel connected to the world. And as Daniel walks away from the park, he begins to reflect on this new understanding, feeling surprised by how deep it feels even though it is so simple. And while he walks, he suddenly remembers a question someone once asked him, a question he now repeats in his mind: what makes a day meaningful? And he realizes that he has not asked himself this for a long time, because he was too busy trying to be productive, too busy trying to reach goals, too busy trying to look like he had everything under control, and maybe during all that busy chasing, he forgot to ask himself what actually gives meaning to his day, what makes his heart feel warm, what makes his mind feel alive. And as he thinks about this deeply, he reaches a quiet corner near a small bookstore he used to visit often, but he has not visited in months, and when he sees the shop, something inside him feels nostalgic, so he stops walking and stands in front of the window, looking at the books displayed there, and the bookstore feels the same as before, warm and welcoming, almost like it is waiting for him. And he remembers how, in the past, he would come here when he felt lost, when he needed inspiration, when he needed silence, and he smiles softly at this memory, feeling a small wave of comfort. So he decides to go inside, hearing the quiet bell ring as he opens the door, and instantly, he feels at home, surrounded by the gentle smell of paper and ink, a smell that always made him feel like he could breathe again. And as he walks between the shelves, running his fingers lightly across the book covers, he thinks about how strange it is that he stopped doing these small things, the things that once gave him strength, and now he understands that motivation is not only about discipline or goals. It is also about connection to yourself, connection to the things that bring you peace and joy, and as this thought settles in his mind, he feels a little more awake, a little more present, and he stops in front of a book with a simple cover, a book he has never seen before, and he picks it up, reads the first few lines, and feels something shift inside him, a small spark of curiosity, and he realizes that curiosity is also a kind of motivation, a soft, gentle motivation that pulls you forward without force. And with this realization, he feels grateful that he decided to take this walk, grateful that he allowed himself to slow down, grateful that he is beginning to understand motivation in a new way, and as he pays for the book and steps outside again, the world looks brighter. His steps feel lighter, and he knows that the journey ahead will not always be easy, but he also knows that he has taken the most important first step, the step of noticing himself again, the step of reconnecting with the world, the step of understanding that motivation is not something you chase, but something you grow, slowly, gently, one small moment at a time, and as he walks home with the new book in his hand, he whispers softly to himself, "I'm beginning again." And this simple sentence feels like a promise to take care of himself, a promise to listen to his needs, a promise to grow motivation not from pressure, but from presence. And as he returns home and stands in the warm light of his living room, he feels a quiet but strong realization rising inside him, the realization that motivation begins with understanding, and understanding begins with slowing down, and slowing down brings you back to yourself, and when you return to yourself, motivation has a place to live again. And as he takes a deep breath and smiles, he knows that this is only the beginning of his journey, a journey of learning how to stay motivated every day, not through force, but through gentle connection. And as he sits down with his tea once more, he feels a soft joy inside him, a joy that whispers, "You are moving again," and this whisper becomes the closing moment of this first chapter in his long, slow, beautiful journey toward daily motivation. When Daniel returns home from his morning walk, holding the small book he bought from the bookstore, he places it gently on the table and stands in the middle of his living room, feeling that calm morning energy still moving through him. But at the same time, he knows that mornings are only one part of the day, and finding motivation that lasts through the entire day is a much bigger challenge, a challenge he has faced many times before, because many days start well for him, full of hope and fresh energy, but somewhere in the middle of the day, the energy disappears as if it never existed, and he finds himself sitting at his desk, staring at his work, unable to begin, unable to move forward, unable to understand why his mind suddenly feels heavy and slow. And as he stands there now, remembering all those afternoons, he feels a soft wave of worry rise inside him, a worry that whispers, "What if this happens again today?" And he knows that this part of himself is honest, because losing motivation in the middle of the day has always been the hardest part. But instead of pushing the worry away, he decides to look at it gently, the same way he looked at his tiredness in the morning. And he tells himself that today he will observe this part of the day differently, not with judgment, but with curiosity, because curiosity helped him feel alive during his walk, and maybe it can help him again now. And as he begins preparing his space for work, opening the curtains wider, clearing a small corner of his desk, placing his tea next to him, he notices how these small tasks give him a sense of direction, and he thinks about how direction is a seed of motivation, because motivation needs something to point toward, even if it is a small task or a simple intention. And as he sits down, he takes a slow breath and looks at the book he brought home, the book he has not yet opened, but he feels connected to it, as if it is a quiet reminder that he can still feel curious. still feel interested in new stories, still feel the world opening inside him, and he places his hand on the book gently before turning to his work, and he decides to do one small thing first, something easy, something that does not demand too much energy. And as he does this small task, he feels a tiny spark, not a big one, but enough to help him begin, and he smiles at this because it feels like proof that small steps matter, proof that motivation returns when you start with something simple. And while he continues working, he focuses on staying present, not worrying about the rest of the day, not thinking about big goals, just staying in the moment, and this simple act slows his mind, making space for clear thinking, and as he works, he begins to understand something important, something that he has always felt but never truly realized, that the middle of the day often feels heavy not because he is lazy or unmotivated, but because he becomes overwhelmed by the number of things he needs to do. And as this realization grows, he thinks back to many days when his list of tasks felt like a mountain he could not climb, and how he always blamed himself instead of understanding the real cause. And now, as he sits there slowly working through one small task, he feels a deep softness in his heart, almost like he is giving himself permission to be human, permission to work slowly, permission to rest, permission to not be perfect. And this feeling becomes a quiet transformation inside him, a shift from pressure to presence, and as he continues working, he remembers something that his teacher once told him, a sentence that now echoes softly in his mind. Motivation is not a fire, it is a garden you must take care of. And the more he thinks about this, the more sense it makes, because gardens do not grow from force, they grow from consistency, from attention, from gentle care, and maybe his motivation is the same, something that grows slowly when he gives it space and kindness. And as he reflects on this, he feels grateful for the calm morning walk, grateful for the quiet moments that helped him reconnect with himself, and grateful that he now understands his struggles more clearly. And with this gratitude, he continues working through the morning until lunchtime arrives, and as he prepares his lunch, he notices the familiar shift in his energy, a slow drop, a small wave of mental fog. And he realizes that this is the moment when he usually loses motivation. This is the moment when the day begins to feel heavy, so he decides to pause and observe it, to sit with the feeling instead of fighting it, and as he eats, he pays attention to his body and his mind, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the slow pace of his thoughts, the quiet worry that says, "You need to do more," and he recognizes that this voice has followed him for many years, always pushing, always demanding, always making him feel like he is behind. And as he listens to this voice, he does something unusual for himself. He answers softly, almost whispering, "It's okay to slow down," and this simple answer feels like a warm blanket over his heart, and he feels his breathing deepen, his shoulders relax, and his mind soften. And he thinks about how often he spoke to himself with pressure instead of kindness, and how maybe part of learning motivation is learning how to speak to himself with gentle words. And as he finishes his lunch, he stands by the window and watches the leaves move in the wind, and he feels a moment of calm flow through him, a moment that reminds him that the middle of the day is not a wall he cannot climb, but a moment he needs to understand. And as he continues watching the world outside, he thinks about meaning again, the question that came to him during his morning walk, the question that now feels deeper: what makes this day meaningful? And he begins to realize that meaning is not something big or dramatic. Meaning can be small, simple, quiet, and maybe the meaning of today is this moment right now, this moment of noticing himself, of understanding his emotions, of listening to his body, of speaking to himself kindly. And as he absorbs this realization, he begins to feel a new type of motivation, a slow, steady motivation that comes from being connected to himself instead of forcing himself. And he slowly walks back to his desk, sits down, and opens the book he bought, not because he needs to read it, but because he wants to take a moment to breathe. And he reads only a few lines, but the words feel soft and warm, like a gentle friend speaking to him, reminding him that stories can heal, stories can guide, stories can open you. And when he closes the book again, he feels refreshed and he begins to work again, not with force, but with quiet rhythm. And as the afternoon light fills his room, he notices that he has been working for longer than he expected, and he feels a small joy in his chest, a joy that whispers, "You are doing well," and he understands that this joy is important because motivation grows when you feel proud of yourself, even if the steps are small. And as the day slowly turns into evening, he reflects on everything he felt today, from the heavy feeling in the morning to the calm walk, from the gentle bookstore moment to the quiet struggle after lunch, and he realizes that today was not perfect, but it was meaningful, deeply meaningful, because he learned to listen to himself, to understand his rhythm, to accept his natural energy flow. And as he prepares dinner, he feels gratitude again. Gratitude for the slow changes happening inside him, changes that are small but real, changes that are guiding him toward a new understanding of motivation. And as he sits down for dinner, he thinks about tomorrow, and for the first time in a long time, tomorrow does not feel heavy, it feels open. It feels like another chance to practice, another chance to understand himself, another chance to take small steps. And as he finishes eating, he sits back in his chair and smiles softly, feeling a warm peace in his chest, a peace that tells him that motivation is not a fight, but a relationship with himself, and he knows that this relationship will grow stronger if he continues to listen, continues to breathe, continues to take small steps. And as he prepares for sleep, brushing his teeth, turning off the lights, feeling the quiet of the night around him, he lies in bed and whispers to himself, "Today, I learned something important." And as the room becomes darker and softer, he continues, "Motivation is not about doing more. It is about understanding myself." And with this gentle thought, he closes his eyes, breathing slowly, feeling calm, and feeling ready for the next chapter of his journey, a chapter that will teach him even more about staying motivated every day, with kindness, with curiosity, and with a quiet. The next morning begins differently for Daniel, not because something dramatic happens, but because he wakes up with a quiet awareness inside him, almost like he can still feel the softness of yesterday's realizations resting in his mind. But as he opens his eyes and looks at the soft morning light on his wall, he also feels something else, something he did not expect, a heavy feeling in his chest, not the same heaviness as the morning before, but a new, quieter kind of heaviness, the kind that whispers, "Maybe today will be harder." And this small whisper surprises him, because he thought he was starting to understand motivation, starting to reconnect with himself, starting to build a gentle rhythm. And now this morning feeling makes him wonder if he did something wrong, if motivation is slipping away again. And for a moment he lies in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a mix of worry and confusion. And he begins to think about all the times in the past when he felt inspired for one day, maybe two, but then suddenly he dropped back into old patterns, old habits, old ways of thinking, and he wonders if that is happening again now. But instead of letting this thought take control, he decides to sit up slowly, letting the morning air touch his face, letting his breath deepen. And he tells himself in a whisper, setbacks are part of the process, and saying these words feels strange but comforting because he has never really allowed himself to accept setbacks before. He always saw them as signs of failure, as proof that he was not strong enough. But now he is learning a new way to speak to himself, a new way to understand his journey, and with this gentle thought in mind, he stands up and walks to the kitchen, noticing that his steps feel slow, not heavy, just slow. And he allows himself to move at this pace, reminding himself that rushing will not help, that motivation grows when you move with awareness. And as he prepares his morning tea, he thinks about purpose, a word that feels large and important, but also confusing, and he wonders if part of his struggle today is connected to this idea of purpose, because purpose is something he often thinks about but rarely understands. And while he sits down at the table with his warm cup in his hands, he begins reflecting on what purpose really means to him, and he remembers a conversation he once had with a friend who said, "Purpose is not something you find, it is something you create." And at the time, those words did not make much sense to him, but now, as he sits in the quiet of the morning, they feel deeper, they feel honest, they feel like something he has been missing, and he begins to ask himself a question he has never asked in a clear way. What purpose am I creating today? And this question feels powerful, not because it demands a big answer, but because it invites him to think about small actions, small steps, small pieces of meaning, and as he sits there, breathing slowly, he begins to think about yesterday's small moments, the gentle walk, the bookstore, the quiet conversation with himself after lunch, and he realizes that purpose does not have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes purpose is simply choosing to take care of yourself, choosing to face difficult feelings with kindness, choosing to show up even when it feels hard. And with this realization, the heavy feeling in his chest begins to soften, just a little, but enough for him to feel a small shift, and he takes another sip of tea, letting the warm liquid calm him, and he tells himself that today he will move slowly, and that moving slowly does not mean he is failing. It means he is learning. It means he is listening. It means he is choosing to understand himself instead of pushing himself. And with this intention, he begins preparing for his day, opening the curtains, letting the soft morning light fill the room, noticing how the colors change on the walls. And as he watches these small details, he feels a deeper connection to the moment, and he thinks about how presence brings strength, how noticing brings clarity, how small awareness can turn into motivation, and he wonders why he never learned this before. Why he always thought motivation was about force and discipline and pushing harder, and now he sees that those ideas made him tired, made him lose himself, made him forget that he is human, and as he sits at his desk, ready to begin his work, he feels a mixture of calm and uncertainty, and he accepts both, telling himself that he can work even with uncertainty. He can begin even with a quiet heaviness, and he starts with one small task again, just like yesterday, because he remembers that small steps lead to movement, and as he completes the first task, something interesting happens. He does not feel a sudden burst of energy, but he feels stable, grounded, steady, and this steadiness feels better than the excitement he used to chase, because it feels real, it feels sustainable, it feels like something he can build on. And as the morning passes, he continues working slowly, gently, with breaks when he needs them, and he notices that the heavy feeling he felt when he first woke up has slowly turned into a soft rhythm, a rhythm that is not fast or strong, but consistent, and he recognizes that this consistency is a form of motivation he has never experienced before, a motivation that does not rush him, does not demand perfection, does not push him into stress, but supports him quietly, like a soft current under the surface. And as he continues working, He begins thinking about purpose again, wondering what kind of purpose he truly wants in his life, not in a big, dramatic way, but in a soft, daily way, and he realizes that he often waits for big achievements to feel meaningful, but maybe meaning comes from the small choices he makes every day, like choosing to work with kindness instead of judgment, choosing to begin even when it feels hard, choosing to breathe through moments of confusion, choosing to listen to himself instead of comparing himself to others, and as these thoughts flow through him, he begins to feel stronger, not in a loud way, but in a quiet, steady way. And he thinks about how strength does not always look like confidence or power. Sometimes strength looks like patience. Sometimes it looks like showing up gently. Sometimes it looks like trying again, and as he reflects on this, he feels a wave of gratitude in his chest. A warm gratitude for the simple truth that he does not need to be perfect to move forward. He just needs to be present, and this thought becomes the soft center of his day, a center he returns to again and again as the hours pass, and when the afternoon arrives, he notices that the usual heavy afternoon feeling does not show up in the same way. It is still there, somewhere, but it is lighter, quieter, softer, and he realizes that this change is happening because he is changing, because he is thinking differently, breathing differently, moving differently, and he feels proud of himself, proud even though the progress is small, and he thinks about how progress is often invisible, often slow, often quiet, but still real, and as he continues working through the afternoon, he can feel his purpose taking shape in a gentle way, a purpose built not from pressure, but from understanding, from compassion, from awareness, and when he stands up to stretch, looking out the window at the warm afternoon light, he realizes that he is learning something important about motivation, something that feels new and old at the same time, and he whispers to himself, "Purpose is created, not found," and saying those words out loud feels like a promise to keep building his purpose day by day, moment by moment, through small steps and gentle awareness, and as the day comes to an end and evening arrives, he prepares his dinner again, noticing that this evening feels different from yesterday, not necessarily better, but deeper, more grounded, and he realizes that he has begun to build a relationship with himself, a relationship built on kindness and curiosity. And he knows this relationship will guide him forward, even on difficult days, especially on difficult days, and as he eats his dinner, he thinks about how strange and beautiful it is that he needed to slow down in order to move forward, that he needed to understand himself in order to grow motivation, and when he finishes his meal and sits quietly for a moment, listening to the soft sounds of the night, he feels a calm confidence inside him, a confidence that does not shout but whispers, a confidence that says, "You are learning, you are growing, you are becoming stronger," and as he prepares for bed, brushing his teeth and turning off the lights, he feels a soft warmth inside him, a warmth that tells him that tomorrow is another chance, another opportunity to practice, another day to create purpose from the small choices he makes, and as he lies down and breathes slowly, he closes his eyes with a gentle smile, feeling grateful for the progress he made today, grateful for the lessons he learned, and grateful for the quiet truth. That motivation is not a destination, but a journey he is finally ready to walk with awareness, with patience, and with a peaceful, open heart. When the next morning arrives, Daniel wakes up feeling neither heavy nor light, neither tired nor full of energy, but somewhere in between, in that quiet middle space that most people ignore because it does not feel dramatic. But as he lies there listening to the soft sounds of the morning outside his window, he realizes that this middle space might actually be important because it is the space where real habits grow, the space where consistency lives, the space where motivation begins to feel like a quiet partner instead of a loud burst of excitement, and as he sits up slowly, stretching his arms above his head, he notices that something inside him feels steady, not perfect, not brilliant, but steady, and he remembers how. Just a few days ago, he would begin each morning with worry, asking himself if he would be motivated or not, but now he is learning to let the morning be simple, to let it be what it is, without expectation, without pressure. And this gentle acceptance feels like a small turning point in his journey, a turning point that whispers, "You are beginning to trust yourself." And as he stands up and walks to the kitchen, preparing his tea with familiar movements, he thinks about trust, about how he has rarely trusted his own rhythm, rarely trusted his own pace, always feeling like he needed to go faster, do more, push harder, and now he is learning that trust grows slowly, the same way plants grow slowly, and he smiles at this simple idea, letting it warm his morning. And as he sits at the table drinking his tea, he notices how the sunlight rests gently on the floor, and he takes a moment to appreciate it, a moment to breathe, a moment to feel present, and he begins thinking about his journey so far, about everything he felt, everything he understood, everything he learned, and he realizes that the biggest change inside him is not the increase in motivation, but the decrease in fear, the fear of failure, the fear of losing progress, the fear of not being enough. And as he recognizes this, he feels something inside him relax, like a knot slowly loosening, and he whispers softly, "I'm learning to let go," and this whisper feels like a truth he needed for a long time. A truth that tells him he no longer needs to fight himself, he no longer needs to chase energy, he only needs to walk with himself gently, step by step, and with this understanding, he begins his workday again, but today something feels slightly different, an almost invisible shift in his awareness, because instead of focusing on how much work he needs to finish, he focuses on the meaning inside each small action, and he remembers a sentence he once heard, "Meaning makes movement easier," and as he begins working on a simple task, he repeats this sentence quietly inside his mind, letting its truth settle into him, and he feels a soft clarity growing inside his chest, a clarity that says, "You do not need to rush, you only need to continue." And as the morning passes, he works with a gentle rhythm, taking small breaks to breathe, looking out the window when his mind feels tired, letting himself slow down when he needs to, and he notices that even though his energy is not high, it is calm, balanced, steady, and he realizes that steady energy is more helpful than strong energy, because steady energy lasts, steady energy supports, steady energy carries him forward, and this realization feels like another turning point, another small but important shift in his understanding of motivation. And as he continues working, he thinks about how many years he tried to rely on excitement, how many years he waited for inspiration to appear like a lightning bolt, how many years he believed that motivation needed to be loud and dramatic, and now he sees that quiet motivation is softer, stronger, and more sustainable, and he smiles at this new understanding, feeling grateful for the slow changes happening inside him. And when lunchtime arrives, he prepares a simple meal and sits near the window again, feeling the warmth of the light on his face, and he begins to reflect on something deeper, something he has not yet fully explored, the difference between motivation and discipline. And as he eats, he thinks about how he used to believe discipline meant forcing himself, pushing himself, ignoring his feelings, and now he is learning that true discipline is gentle. It is the willingness to return, the willingness to try again, the willingness to move forward even on slow days, and this thought surprises him, because he never saw discipline as gentle before. He always saw it as strict and uncomfortable, but now he is learning to see it as a quiet form of love, a commitment to himself, a promise to continue, and as he reflects on this, he feels a warm gratitude in his chest, a gratitude that tells him he is changing, really changing, not in a dramatic way, but in a deep, meaningful way. And as he finishes eating, he takes a small walk outside, just around his neighborhood, letting the fresh air clear his mind, and during this walk, he notices small things again, the way the branches move in the wind, the sound of footsteps on the sidewalk, the soft laughter of children playing in the distance, and he feels connected to the world in a new way, a way that reminds him that life is not made only of big moments, but of small ones, quiet ones, ordinary ones, and he realizes that motivation, too, grows from ordinary moments, from everyday experiences, from simple connections, and this realization makes him breathe deeply, feeling the air fill his lungs, feeling alive, and when he returns home, he continues working through the afternoon, but he does not force himself, he simply moves at his gentle pace, trusting his rhythm, trusting his breath, trusting the small progress he is making, and as the hours pass, he begins to feel something new, a soft sense of confidence. A confidence that does not shout or demand attention, but rests quietly inside him, like a warm light, and he realizes that this confidence comes from showing himself that he can continue, even on slow days, even on uncertain days, even when his energy is quiet, and he understands that this is the real turning point of his journey, the moment when he begins to believe in his own ability to keep going, and as evening arrives, he closes his laptop and walks into the kitchen, feeling proud of the work he completed today. Not because it was perfect, not because it was impressive, but because it was honest, because it was steady, because it was real, and as he prepares his dinner, he thinks again about purpose, about how he is creating it slowly, piece by piece. Through small actions, through daily choices, through gentle awareness, and he feels grateful for this, grateful for the chance to build something meaningful, even if it takes time, and when he sits down to eat, he feels a deep calm in his heart, a calm that tells him he is exactly where he needs to be, and as he finishes his meal, he thinks about tomorrow with a soft smile, not with excitement, not with worry, but with trust, trust that he can continue, trust that he can grow, trust that motivation will meet him again, and as he prepares for bed, feeling the gentle quiet of the night around him, he lies down and lets his breathing slow, and he whispers softly, "I am learning to live in the middle of the journey." And as the darkness settles around him, he feels at peace, ready for the next chapter, ready to continue with an open heart and a steady, gentle mind. The next morning greets Daniel with a soft, peaceful kind of silence, the kind of silence that feels like a warm blanket around the room, and as he opens his eyes, he notices right away that something inside him feels different, not dramatic, not powerful, but quietly renewed, like a soft spark waking up after resting for a long time, and he lies still for a moment, feeling his breath move gently in and out, feeling the weight of the blanket on his body, feeling the softness of the morning light on the wall, and he realizes that this gentle sense of renewal is not an accident. It is the result of all the small steps he has taken over the past few days, all the kindness he has shown himself, all the moments when he allowed himself to slow down. And he feels a small, warm pride rising inside him, a pride that says, "You are changing," and with this soft feeling, he sits up slowly, stretching his arms and letting his body wake up, and as he stands and walks to the kitchen, he notices that his steps feel light, not because he is full of energy, but because he is not fighting himself the way he used to, and this lack of inner resistance feels like a quiet strength growing inside him, a strength he never realized he had. And as he prepares his morning tea, watching the water boil and listening to the gentle sound, he thinks about how powerful it is to move without fighting yourself, and he smiles at this thought, feeling grateful for every small moment that has helped him reach this point. And when he sits at the table with his tea, he begins reflecting on something deeper, something that has been slowly forming inside his awareness. The idea that motivation is not only about action, but also about emotion. About how you feel toward yourself, toward your life, toward the world. And he begins to understand that motivation becomes stronger when you feel connected, when you feel supported, when you feel heard, even if the person listening is yourself. And this realization feels profound, a soft but powerful truth that makes his chest warm, and he whispers quietly, "I'm beginning to feel connected," and those words feel like another turning point, another step in his journey. And as he prepares to begin his day, he looks around his home, noticing how familiar everything is, and yet how different it feels because he is different, because he has changed the way he experiences these simple moments, and he thinks about how inner change makes. Again, and he smiles softly, feeling grateful for this simple beauty, and as he sits down at his desk to begin his work, he feels a clarity that surprises him, a clarity that feels like the morning light shining directly into his thoughts. And he realizes that clarity is a result of calmness, and calmness is a result of kindness, and kindness is a decision he makes every day now, a decision he did not know was so important until this moment. And with this clarity guiding him, he begins working with a steady rhythm. Not rushing, not forcing, just moving gently from one small task to another. And as the morning passes, he feels something he has not felt in a long time. Flow, the natural, gentle flow of doing something with presence and ease. And this sensation fills him with a soft joy, a joy that makes him sit up straighter, breathe deeper, and whisper quietly, "I can do this," and he realizes that this joy is not coming from the tasks themselves, but from the way he is working, the way he is treating himself, the way he is staying present, and this understanding becomes another piece of the puzzle, another key to daily motivation. And as he continues working, he begins thinking about all the people he has known who seem naturally motivated, naturally confident, naturally strong, and he realizes that he used to believe they were simply born that way, but now he understands something different, something deeper. That their confidence and motivation grew from small choices, small moments of courage, small acts of kindness toward themselves, and he understands now that strength is not something you are given, but something you build, slowly, silently, gently. And feeling this truth in his bones makes him straighten his shoulders, makes his chest feel warm, makes his eyes soften, because he realizes that he is building this strength too, and he is building it in his own quiet way. And as the afternoon approaches, he takes a break to prepare lunch, noticing again how the afternoon light softens the room, and he takes a moment to lean against the counter and breathe slowly, feeling grateful for this moment of peace. And as he eats, he begins thinking about the days before this journey, the days when he felt lost, tired, disappointed in himself, and he realizes that even though those days were painful, they taught him something important. They taught him what it feels like to disconnect from himself, and without that experience, he would not be able to appreciate this new sense of connection. And he whispers softly, "I needed those days too," and those words surprise him, because he never imagined he would feel gratitude for the difficult moments. But now he understands that growth often begins in confusion. Transformation often begins in struggle, and motivation often begins in understanding what it feels like to lose it. And as he finishes eating and steps outside for a small walk, He feels the fresh air touch his face, and he notices how alive the world looks today, how bright the trees seem, how calm the sky feels, how gentle the movements of people around him are, and he realizes that the world looks more beautiful when you feel more peaceful inside. And as he walks slowly, noticing small details, letting his mind rest, he begins thinking about purpose again, and suddenly, he feels a moment of clarity, a moment when everything inside him becomes still, and he understands something new, something important, that purpose grows from connection to yourself, connection to your values, connection to the world, and he realizes that over the past few days, he has been rebuilding this connection without even noticing it. And this realization feels like a soft wave of light moving through him, warming him, strengthening him, filling him with a quiet confidence, and he smiles softly, feeling grateful for this moment of clarity. And as he returns home and continues working through the afternoon, he notices that his motivation feels different today, not because he has more energy, but because he feels more aligned with himself, and he understands now that alignment is a kind of motivation too, a deep one, a lasting one, a motivation that comes from honesty, from presence, from calmness, and as the day slowly turns into evening, he closes his work for the day and stands up, stretching his body and feeling a long, gentle breath flow from his chest, and he realizes that this breath is not only a release of tension, but a symbol of how far he has come, how much he has changed, and he whispers softly, "I am becoming stronger," and those words feel true in a way they never felt before, true in a way that fills him with a warm, quiet pride, and as he prepares dinner, he reflects on the day, on the sense of renewal he felt in the morning, on the flow he experienced while working, on the clarity he discovered during his walk, and he feels grateful for all of it, grateful for the small steps he continues to take, grateful for the journey he is walking, and when he finally sits down to eat, he feels calm, peaceful, connected, and he realizes that these feelings are the foundation of daily motivation. The foundation he has been slowly building without even noticing it, and as the night grows quiet and he prepares for sleep, brushing his teeth and turning off the lights, he lies in bed and reflects softly on everything he feels, and with a gentle, warm whisper, he says to himself, "I am growing every day," and as he closes his eyes, letting sleep take him gently, he knows deep inside that tomorrow will bring another chance to continue this beautiful journey, another chance to understand himself, another chance to strengthen the quiet flame of motivation that now lives softly and steadily in his heart. When the sun rises the next morning, Daniel wakes up feeling calm and balanced, and as he slowly opens his eyes, he realizes something gentle but powerful. He no longer wakes with fear. He no longer wonders if he will have motivation or not. He no longer questions whether he can continue his journey, because now, after all these quiet days of slowing down, listening, breathing, and rebuilding himself from the inside out, he feels a new kind of trust living in his body, a trust that's but because it is steady, warm, and deeply rooted, like a soft flame that has learned how to protect itself from the wind, and as he sits up, stretching his arms and breathing in the gentle morning air, he realizes that he has reached a different stage of his journey. A stage where motivation is no longer something he chases, but something he grows, something he carries inside him, something that flows through him naturally, and as he stands and walks toward the kitchen, preparing his morning tea with familiar, comfortable movements, he notices how effortless everything feels now, not because life has magically changed, but because he has changed, because he has learned how to move with himself instead of fighting against himself. And this realization warms his chest as he sits at the table, holding the warm cup in his hands, watching the sunlight dance quietly across the floor, and he knows in this moment that he has arrived at a new understanding, an understanding that motivation is not about perfection, not about constant excitement, not about endless energy, but about connection, presence, and gentle, steady action, one small moment at a time. As he begins his day, opening his curtains, breathing deeply, and settling into his desk chair, he remembers how his journey began with heaviness, with confusion, with a deep sense of being lost, and now he looks at himself with a soft smile, realizing how far he has come, realizing how much he has learned, realizing how slowly, almost quietly, he has built a new foundation inside him, a foundation made of understanding instead of pressure, patience instead of judgment, curiosity instead of fear. And as he starts his first small task, he feels a sense of alignment move through him, as if his mind, his body, and his heart are finally working together instead of pulling in different directions. And this alignment feels like the true meaning of motivation, a motivation that does not shout, but whispers, a motivation that does not push, but guides, a motivation that does not demand, but supports. And as he works, he thinks about all the moments in the past when he believed motivation needed to feel big, dramatic, strong, and now he understands why those moments never lasted, because motivation that is loud burns fast, but motivation that is gentle burns long, and he smiles at this new truth, feeling grateful for the softness that has replaced his old pressure, grateful for the kindness he now offers himself, grateful for the balance he feels inside. When midday arrives, he stands up from his desk and walks to the window, watching the world outside, watching people move through their day, watching the way sunlight touches the buildings, watching the gentle rhythm of life happening outside, and he realizes that he, too, is moving with rhythm now, not rushing, not dragging, but flowing, and he thinks about how beautiful it is that life becomes easier when you learn to flow with yourself instead of forcing yourself. And as he prepares a simple lunch and sits down to eat, he reflects on a new understanding that is forming inside him, an understanding that motivation is not just something he feels, but something he chooses, something he practices, something he builds like a quiet muscle, day after day. And he realizes that this practice has changed him, not because it made him stronger in a dramatic way, but because it made him stable, calm, and connected, and he thinks about how rare and precious that stability is, how so many people chase big moments of inspiration without realizing that small moments of presence are what truly build a meaningful life. And as he finishes his lunch, he whispers softly to himself, "This is the life I want," and those words feel true, deeply true. Because he knows now that he is not trying to become someone else, he is trying to become more himself, more gentle, more aware, more alive. In the afternoon, he takes another slow walk, feeling the cool air on his face, feeling the warmth of the sun on his skin, feeling the quiet joy of simply moving through the world. And during this walk, he begins thinking about the future, not with fear, not with pressure, but with curiosity, wondering what new things he can build with this new understanding, wondering how he can continue to grow, wondering how he can carry this calm motivation into new parts of his life. And he realizes that the future no longer scares him in the same way it used to, because now he knows that he can handle slow days, he can handle quiet days, he can handle difficult days, because he has learned how to return to himself. And this ability feels like the strongest form of motivation he has ever known. And as he looks up at the sky, watching the white clouds drift softly across the blue, he feels a moment of deep gratitude, gratitude for the journey he has walked, gratitude for the days when he struggled, Gratitude for the days when he grew. Gratitude for the small steps that changed everything, and he whispers softly, "I'm grateful for this journey," and those words float through him like a warm breeze. When he returns home and continues working through the afternoon, he moves with a steady ease, completing his tasks without the old weight of pressure on his shoulders, and he notices how much more he enjoys the process now. How each task feels lighter because he no longer demands perfection from himself, and he realizes that enjoyment is a part of motivation too, a part he often ignored, and now he feels grateful for it. Grateful for the small sense of joy that comes from simply showing up. And as the day shifts into evening, he closes his computer and stretches his arms, feeling his muscles relax and his mind soften, and he thinks about everything he has experienced over these days, everything he has learned about motivation. And he realizes that the most important lesson is this: motivation is not a moment, it is a relationship with yourself, a relationship that becomes stronger when you listen, when you rest, when you breathe, when you take small steps. And as he walks into the kitchen to prepare dinner, he smiles softly at this truth, feeling a quiet confidence growing inside him, a confidence that he will carry with him for the rest of his life. When dinner is ready, he sits at the table and eats slowly, feeling the gentle peace of the evening settle around him, and he reflects on the life he is creating, a life built on presence, patience, and purpose. And he realizes that purpose no longer feels confusing, because now he understands that purpose grows from small choices, small actions, small moments of honesty, and he feels grateful for this clarity, grateful for the soft strength that now lives inside him, grateful for the new way he sees himself, and as he finishes eating and begins preparing for bed, he walks slowly through his home, feeling connected to the space around him, feeling connected to the world, feeling connected to himself.